So today's session is a session that looks at who are our students, who are the students, and we believe that it's really important that we understand a little bit better who they are, where they come from, what kind of language they have. Is English the first or the second language? Or because that can have an impact and should have an impact on our teaching. I've seen Carol offering and showing us data in the past, and I've seen the reaction on faculty members. It's kind of really, it's such an eye-opener when you suddenly you get to understand a little bit more of their students' background. So we have Carol Naylor today, Associate Director of the UBC Student Development Services, which is a big umbrella that includes a number of units in such as Access and Diversity, Go Global, International House, and a few more.
Yeah, I can talk just a little bit about that so people know.
You go ahead, because we don't have a lot of time, so we have lots of things to say and talk about in very little time.
Great. So I am here on behalf of Janet Teasdale, who is the Senior Director of Student Development Services, and I work very closely with Janet, and we work with our new VP students, Louise Cowan. I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to see Louise or hear her speak, but she's just been with us now, I think, for about 3 or 4 months. But we're really pleased to have her on board. And I'm very pleased to be here today and share some of the data and information we have about our students. I'm sure many of you in this room have probably worked at UBC for some time. Probably many of you, if not most of you, have worked in other institutions. And so you probably have experiences of what it was like in the institution you worked at before, what it's like at UBC. So today will really be an opportunity just to look at the UBC student experience, their demographics, their expectations, some of their challenges, and so on. And really then we'll turn it back to you and ask you, are you seeing this in your classrooms, and what do you see as the implications for teaching that either you've already felt or potentially that we can foresee in the future? So as Louisa alluded to, Student Development and Services is one of those umbrella. I won't bore you with too much data, but I will leave behind our newly minted annual report, which really just outlines the way in which we partner with faculty for student learning and success. So some of you will probably have heard of things like community service learning, international student development, Go Global, career services, counseling, student health. Those are all under the umbrella of Student Development and Services. And this little booklet tells how we can partner with you to support your students' learning and success. So we'll start out then and take a look at the information. I'm going to start first at just the demographics, and then we'll get into some of the more interesting things. So UBC by the numbers. There are 48,722 students on this campus at last count. 36% of them are full-time and 64% are part-time. 80% commute to campus, and you can see the average age there for our undergraduate is 20 and graduate 28. One of the reasons for the 20 course age of our undergraduates is 72% are admitted directly from high school, and only 27% are admitted from post-secondary. And I can share these slides with Louisa, and they could probably get back to you if you're interested in them. Yeah?
Sorry, can I just real quick, is this all UBC Vancouver?
Just UBC Vancouver, so thank you for clarifying. One university, 2 great campuses, yeah.
And can I ask, what's the difference between part-time and full-time? Like, I think for some of the awards and the housing, it's sort of 3 courses. There
is a different definition. This is from Planning and Institutional Research. I'm not 100% sure what particular, I'm really not sure which criteria they used. Their UBC, yeah, it's probably 3 or more credits would be, or 3 or more courses, full-time courses would be full-time.
One more time.
Yeah, sure. Sorry.
48,000 odd students, or is that only undergrad, or does that include grad?
That would be all students.
All students.
Yeah. So the demographics, the proportion of visa students, that's students who are here on a study visa, otherwise known as, I guess, our international students. So you can see in the left hand, there's 83% of our students are domestic in 2011, and 17% are designated as international students.
Just undergrads, or postgrads as well?
This would be all students.
All students.
This would be all students, yes. And then you can see the male-female breakdown. So for our ISI is just another way of saying our international students, and domestic. So you can see that there has been in 2009, 2010, and 2011, 60, 63, and 61% female. So it's been higher for the last 3 years of female to male, and that hasn't changed significantly. So overall, 60% female, 40% male. Any questions on that? Okay, so the ethno-racial distribution. So this survey data that you're looking at right now is something that we call the new to UBC data. And so this is a survey that goes out to all incoming undergraduate students. So that is what this data is from. So we ask them how they would identify themselves, how they would identify their ethno-racial background. So you can see in 2011, 37% identify as, would say, white, 37% Chinese, 6% Korean, and so on.
Excuse me, are there also statistics going back like a decade and 2 decades, just to see, sort of show us what transitions?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, you're just seeing the last 3 years data here. Yeah. So if you do the addition of Chinese, Korean, and Japanese, you can see that 45% of domestic and 44% of international students identify as either Chinese, Korean, or Japanese. So if you think about that earlier statistics that I showed you, that we have 17% officially international students here on campus, and yet 45% or 44% of our students, all students, are identifying as Chinese, Korean, or Japanese. One of the common sort of misconceptions is that diversity on this campus is in our international students, but it's really not. There are many domestic students whose really, their experience is probably more similar to our international students than what we might think of as our typical domestic student. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is the country of citizenship. So again, if we take that 17% who are here on a study visa or international students, 19% of them, our highest, are actually from the United States. So again, it's not necessarily our international students where we're getting the most of our diversity in our student population. The other thing that's interesting to look at is the whole issue of language. This is an interesting slide. So first language learned and still understood in 2011, and this is for domestic students. So only 51% of our domestic students learned English as a first language. Half, just over half. And in our international students, it's 36%. So not tremendously different if you might think international versus domestic. 77% of our domestic and 90% of our international students can speak 2 or more languages well enough to conduct a conversation. So a very diverse and capable group. Next, we're looking at their intentions. So again, these were incoming students, incoming undergraduates, and we asked them, are you planning to stop at your bachelor's degree, or are you planning to go on and do a master's or a doctorate? You can see over the last 3 years, this has been steadily climbing. And slightly higher for international students who are planning to go on to do further education than domestic.
Excuse me. When they say they want to do further education, is at UBC or outside?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
And what is the actual number of students that wind up doing a master's or a doctorate? Is it like
I don't know the number off the top of my head. It's certainly not.
Yeah, I know.
Not 69%.
This is similar
yeah.
to like first year where you teach first year students in science, and so many of them want to go on to
Med
medical
school,
right?
yes.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're getting here is just to say that our incoming cohort is a very ambitious group. They have big plans about where they want to go. Yeah.
Do you have any idea how this compares with other Canadian universities? And if the trend is, the trend line is the same?
On these particular measures, I don't. On some of the later stats, I do. Probably, I'm sure someone in Pair, I could, if you are interested, I could probably get that. But at this point, no, I just have this for UBC. This is a, oops. Oh, I think I have my slides out of order. Just one second. Okay, I'm going to have to do an interpretive dance of this slide. We asked incoming students, what percentage of you expect to get a grade of A, B, C, or fail? So just to give you an example, in the case of international students, 61% before they started, so this is in the fall when it's all bright and beautiful, how many of you expect to get a grade of A? And 61%. I can't remember the exact number. For domestic, it was a little bit less than that. This is the actual. So you can see in the case of international students, 61% are expecting to get an A, but 16% actually are. In the other case, I wish if I can find that slide, I'll show it to you. But in domestic, it's still a precipitous drop. And this is typically happening when? This realization that the mark they thought they were going to get isn't necessarily the mark. Yeah, midterms, yeah. So we're starting to see sort of in that October time frame, some of the realization, yeah.
Again, this is like the undergraduates, or is that like everybody?
No, this is undergraduate. So this is, again, new to UBC. So this is new to UBC undergraduate. Thanks, yeah. So again, more just speaking again to their ambitions. They have big expectations for themselves when they're coming about how far they'll go with their education, how well they'll perform, and so on.
The big difference is in between the level A. The others are very similar.
Well, actually, this is my fault. I don't have the before slide. What you're seeing here is domestic and international.
Yeah.
And this is just the after picture. Okay, so this is the actual grades. Okay, so imagine if I had just shown you a slide before this that showed 61% of international students expecting to get an A. That's gone down to 16. And over here, I think domestic, it was somewhere in the high 50s who are expecting to get an A, and then that's dropped down to 23. And then, of course, no one is expecting, 0 people are putting D. And very, very few, 10% or less, are expecting to get a C. Yeah?
There are not the actual numbers on the chart. What kind of numbers are we talking about? Did you survey everybody? Did you survey dozens of respondents?
The new to UBC, yeah, the new to UBC survey data, that is all incoming undergraduate students who are sent the survey, and I think the response rate is somewhere around 60%. So it's quite a large sample.
Everybody gets the survey?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. This is looking a little bit at their confidence. So we asked them to answer this statement in terms of how much they agree that I am confident that I will have the ability to succeed in all of my courses. So the comparison there, you can see in 2011, strongly agreed. From 2010, the domestic students, their confidence has gone down marginally, so from 38% down to 34%. And if it's in red, Paris assures me that that's statistically significant. International students has gone up in terms of how they strongly agree. 36% in 2010 has gone up to 40%. Any questions on that slide?
Are there take-home messages in the sense that, like, what do we do or don't do? Like, is maybe high school just being too easy, or maybe we're too hard, or, you know what I mean?
That's one of the questions that we were going to ask at the end of the presentation is, what are the take-home messages that you see? When I first showed this in a session that we were at last month, I put it up in the same way with sort of no judgment or any kind of leading commentary. And one of the professor's reaction was, so you're telling me I should give them all A's? And so that was interesting, no, there is no sort of one message to be had by all of this. The only message that I guess we're trying to get across is that there is a gap between what students are expecting their university or their first year at university to be like and what it actually is. And so then I guess I would put the question to you is, what are the implications of that for teaching? If you're teaching, especially first year students, how are you going to experience that in your classrooms? How, if at all, would you change or adjust? And we can launch into that right now if you like. Is anyone here primarily teaching first year students? Do you see this? And how do you deal with it? Or what question would you like to put out to the group if you haven't found a way to face it?
Well, I do teach quite a few first-year students, but probably all years. But yeah, I survey my students at the start because I use clickers, and I say, what is your expected grade?
Great.
And it kind of mirrors what you said, where like a very large number of them are expecting an A, and smaller number of B, very few C's and below.
Mm.
And you get the odd joker who says they're expecting a fail or whatever. But yeah, I think they're just coming in with too many high expectations from high school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I was talking with a Waterloo professor of mine from a long time ago, 30 years ago or so, and he said that at their school, for their program, I think they said that some school north of North Bay, Ontario, they don't even admit, even if the student is 100%, just because they know the student is likely to fail, because their high school is just too easy or whatever, right? And so I think it's like, when they bring people in and admit people, are they admitting on just a level scale, or do they normalize the units? How do you know what's
so the inflation of grades. Yeah, if you talk to the admissions office, they would agree that there has been that over the years. I think one of the greatest initiatives on campus right now, which should level the playing field, is broad-based admission. Is everyone familiar with, so UBC's movement towards broad-based admission, which is looking at more than GPA in terms of who we're admitting. So I think over the next 3-4 years, we should see potentially a different type of student. There's still those, I think, even with broad-based admission, if it's a certain GPA or above, they still are almost guaranteed some kind of admission. So it's not going to completely change. But I think there could be some impact.
Do you know offhand if UBC tracks students as they go through UBC and see how they've performed based on what high school they've come in with, and then kind of draw some connections?
They probably do. I don't know of it myself, but I know Andrew Arita is the person in admissions who does all of that kind of work. And absolutely, if it's been done, he'll be the one to get that information from.
Ed, can I ask you, what do you do once the students, your students in your class respond that way, and you know that it's not going to happen? What do you do with their answers? Do you comment? Do you have a discussion? Do you engage the students in a conversation about that, or you let it?
Well, I usually use a line like, I heard this at UBC about 5-10 years ago, where they said the average student coming in is like about 85% average or whatever, but that drops to 67% after year one. So I tell them that at the start of the year. I don't know if I should or shouldn't, but just tries to make it a little bit more realistic. But in my course, we do, I mean, it's a rigorous course, but we do give out a fair number of high marks. But the average will be like 73% or something like that. And unfortunately, about 20% of the first year students will fail in our course. So in other words, we're seeing a lot of high marks, but we're also still seeing a lot of failures.
Yeah. Do others broach the topic in their courses? Yeah.
I think we found that it's not, I mean, you can't tell them this at the beginning of term, but it's really, you kind of have to show them that's more effective. So, I mean, you mentioned already, you see, and you have data that supports, it's around midterm time. So it's really, I guess, the earlier the better, and I'm not saying we found a great way to implement this yet, but the earlier the better that there's some kind of assessment that they can see kind of where they stand. I think that's what gets people to change what they're doing if they're behind.
And to know where there are help and support if they are struggling as well, so that it isn't sort of just a scare tactic of you're going down, but yeah, here's the things you can do to help in this situation.
Michael,
Interesting you're saying all these, like, with reference to year one undergraduate students. I teach in a master program, which is a professional master, yet we are facing the same situation as well. So I'm coming in, expecting everything to be A's, and you happen to be giving them like lower than that, that's actually broke the bank right away, then I agree what people are saying in a way. I mean, we've been kind of helping them to adjust to go through the transition and whatnot, setting different expectations and whatsoever. Yet, I mean, we're still seeing them after 4 years of studies, and when they come to the 5th year, coming to the master program, they're still having the same mentality.
Because they are very, the fieldwork accepted to our program are the top students in undergraduate, so they expect us to keep the same level. They did not realize graduate school is a bit different than undergraduate. So.
But I'm wondering, I remember when Carol showed me this data for the first time, I remember thinking, what am I doing in my classes to help those 23%, that 20% There are things that I can do before they get the midterm. I can do all sorts of quizzes and assessment and help them kind of check their level of progress before the big obstacle, the big midterm. So make sure that they start integrating some thinking, they need, because they do need to shift. Some thinking needs to happen there for the student to start making some changes to their way of learning, for example, as well as to assessing their own understanding and all of that. But what I took away the first time was, okay, what can I do, not to make it easier, not necessarily that, but to make it, to give them the strategies, because I want my students to succeed. I don't enjoy putting a bad grade. It takes me, for one thing, it takes me 3 times to mark a bad paper than it takes me to mark a good paper. But also, generally speaking, I would say I try to use a number of strategies to help them not cope with failure, but get better at learning, because sometimes there are problems at taking notes, of learning to study, understanding the expectations that we have are quite different from my school. Lauren,
Could I ask a question? How many faculties here actually normalize? I'm with the business school, and I know that we know how many A's, B's, C's, and D's we're going to get.
Yeah.
So the notion that we're going to get all of our students to A is just simply not going to happen.
Oh, no, absolutely. I don't think we want to go there. It's not that we want to give A's so easily,
But I'm saying it's antithetical
suggesting.
to try to say I'm going to support every student to get an A.
No,
when
I don't think
it's
that's what I
usually
said.
not
I'm
going to
not, but I'm helping them and just trying to succeed, trying to meet their own expectations. I'm going to do my best, trying to help them both deal with the fact that they're not going to get an A, perhaps, and B, understanding that it's not the end of the world if they're not going to get an A.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything. It's not an impact, should not have an impact on their future success and so on.
I'm just curious how many faculties actually have this. Do we know how many faculties normalize?
Were they normalized? I'm not sure.
I can tell you that a number of departments do have policies in place. And I can certainly say that my department does, which is French, Hispanic, and Italian Studies. I'm not sure. Let's open. Yeah.
I teach only upper level undergrads and graduate students, and I find that this is not the end. This is in many respects, because especially with your data about intention to go on to graduate school, especially in the health sciences, that the courses are a means to an end. It's, the end is medical school, dental school, nursing school, physio, whatever it is that they choose to. Business school, I have a few, and our approach in the College of Health Disciplines is actually quite different. If you master the material and you master it in a masterful way, you deserve to get a grade that's reflective to that. So we actually don't normalize on purpose because we're teaching the concepts. But my point is here that I think the recognition that whether it's a nationwide trend or a global trend, is that undergraduate education used to be the goal, completing an undergraduate degree. It is now a stepping stone to the next level. Whether or not we're seeing the creme de la creme of the country, and of course those highest level students are going to go on, or whether that's just the way education is going these days. I'm very aware that even though I'm teaching to the concepts, some students are learning to the grade. And there's a disconnect there that I find troubling, and I still haven't found the comfortable place to do that. But no, we don't normalize. I'll come out and say that, and I don't want to, because I don't think that if the bottom 10% of my class does C work and not F work, then they're going to get a C. They're not going to get an F.
Yeah. Sorry, did you? Sorry, I thought I said something.
We don't.
just killed another question.
I was just going to say we don't normalize either in computer science. One thing I do start the year off though is I start the year off with Carl Wyman's best practices, like from the Carl Wyman Science Education Initiative, where we actually tell students that to think like an expert, to be an expert at any complex task, requires 10,000 hours,
Right.
or 5,000 hours of work, right? And just to show people that it's hard work to master a subject these days, and they have to be prepared to work very, very hard. And many of them won't, and so the marks kind of gravitate, or whatever the word is, sift out.
Right.
But yeah, most of our students are in a position whereby maybe they just can't put in the extra time or the extra hours, but we're still trying to get them to model some expert-like thinking in as best manner as we can. So hopefully they get something out of it.
I'm a visitor from Germany, and I was told the definition of A is the upper 10%. So is that true? There are always the 10% best in the final exam will get an A?
Okay. No, in the computer science department, we can have, like, for example, one of our introductory computer courses, we have about 35–40% A's.
Oh.
So yeah, no, we don't do that. We scale up if necessary, but usually we don't scale down.
And the goal is not for this graph to change. I mean, the goal is not that I would stand here 5 years from now and that purple at the beginning would equal their expectation. It's around the effect on the student experience, and the effect on their future learning is the shock of that. So it's how do we prepare them for it, and how do we help them deal with it when it does happen. And there are a lot of things that you in your own classrooms are already doing. There's also other supports and resources elsewhere on campus that you can connect your students to. So that, I guess, is the take-home, or one of the take-home messages as well from them. Are we ready to move on from grade shock? All right. Next, I want to look at their motivation. We ask students, and this is not new to UBC, this is the Canadian University Survey Consortium. So this is a number of Canadian universities. They ask a number of questions, and one of the ask is why. Why did you choose not UBC, but why did you choose to come to university in the first place? And 2 out of 3, and this is consistent year after, they don't do the survey every year, I think it's every 3 years, but 2 out of 3 first-year UBC students, because we do get our own data, said it was either to prepare for a specific job or career or to get a good job. So in some ways, career-related. Jumping back to the new to UBC survey, we asked as well, how many of you intend to take part in enriched educational experiences? So things that might be in some ways relevant to career. They might be other reasons why they're engaging in them. So things like internships, practicum. We also asked them, do you plan to do research-related activities, community service learning, study abroad? And so I want to show you those numbers as well, because there's also, again, a bit of a difference when we see what actually happens. So on the top, you're looking at domestic students, and we're asking them, you can see there, are you intending to take part in student leadership activities, co-op education, research activities? That's very broadly defined. We don't say research in partnership with a faculty member, just research activities, community service learning, international learning, and internships. And then you can see for international students as well, there's some differences there. And it's sometimes just internationally internships are used rather than co-op, so some of that is just sort of a difference.
And do you have correlating end of cycle data? This is all intended. It's interesting that the international students have such a greater intention to participate.
Yes.
And does that actually?
I have some data from Nessie. We don't have data that UBC does on the sort of graduating students to see how many.
Right.
But I have Nessie data that does survey senior students to see how many actually did. The problem, though, is that Nessie doesn't define it exactly the way the new to UBC does. But I'll give you some of the numbers just as for comparison. So for study abroad, so that would be international learning, only 17% of UBC students participate in study abroad. So there's a big drop there. Work on research with a faculty member. Now remember, we didn't specify it had to be with a faculty member, but 21%. And just to give you some comparison with US peer institutions, they're averaging about 28%. So we're lower than our peer US institutions on that measure. Community service learning. This one's difficult because Nessie lumps it in with community service learning or volunteer work. So if you ask graduating students, did you participate in community service learning or volunteer work, in actual fact, 64% of UBC students. But this, I would say, if you added on volunteer work here, it could look very different. Practica, internships, field experience, and clinical assignments, students who've actually done that is 44%, well below our US peers at 58%. Questions, comments about that?
The one that you didn't mention or that I may have missed is co-op education.
Sorry, yes, co-op. Yeah, I don't have that in terms of a percentage, I'm sorry. I have the number of co-op work terms completed, but it's not going to be. It's low at UBC. It's probably less than 20% of our students would participate in co-op.
Is that a reflection of the available opportunities?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But generally, Carol, do we know why they, so do we serve the students before and after?
We have some,
to find out what happened.
Yeah, we have some theories. One of the things with studying internationally, if you talk to people in the Go Global office, they talk to students a lot about who are interested in going overseas to work. And then they see sort of, a lot of times it's that the student's idea of why they want to travel is just misguided in the first place. So it's not really connected to their learning. They just thought it would be cool to go to Australia or something like that. So in actual fact, the Go Global office sometimes is almost trying to not talk them out of it, but to look for maybe a different kind of experience. Sometimes it has to do with the whole transfer credit phenomenon, and it gets very complicated. Now we have partner institutions, and it's should be quite straightforward, but in some cases for particular programs, it does mean the student having to extend their degree, which is more costly. So those are some of the common reasons. That's okay. Any other questions about that?
Do you know anything in particular about the community service learning? Do students,
Yeah.
why is the drop in?
We don't know if there's a drop actually.
Okay.
In terms of intention. I think I don't have the numbers just for community service learning at my fingertips. So I wouldn't say that. But with community service learning at UBC, there's two ways you can participate in that. You can participate within the confines of a course, so it's a curricular, and they also have sort of extracurricular community service learning. So I think that's one way to sort of broaden students' experiences. It doesn't always have to be taking a full course that's based in community service learning. There are reading week programs that they can do and so on.
But I'm wondering, Carol, then should we, as a takeaway, should we, since we're as faculty members, should we look at, are we giving students opportunities to pursue those goals? So are we creating a community service learning program within our courses? Are we giving them research opportunities, or what about international learning opportunities? Are we offering courses?
I think from an individual faculty member's perspective, I mean, there may be department heads and program coordinators in the room as well, but I think there's probably each of you could see one or two up there that you might be able to actually take initiative on and move forward. This in here, for example, it will tell you if you do want to think about integrating community service learning into your course, who do you call? What do you do? So there are people on campus and in student development services that you can speak with. Same with international learning opportunities, so Go Global. If you want to find out if you have an institution or a colleague at another institution who approaches you about potentially having some sort of international learning opportunity, where do you go with that? What do you do? Some of it is just knowing about where to refer students for things like student leadership activities, and internships, so going to the Career Center or the Center for Student Involvement. And a lot of you in your own departments and faculties probably have ways for students to get involved and so on. For research activities, I would say work study and work learn. You're all familiar with the work study, work learn program. So this is your opportunity to get a bit of a wage subsidy to hire a student to work with you. And it can be in a number of capacities, but one very popular way that people use that program is for research, so research assistance. So I think there's many ways that faculty can sort of tap in. Is there any ways that you are contributing to this that I haven't mentioned? Or any questions about any of those opportunities? Yeah.
You don't collect data what happens to the students after they leave UBC.
We do.
Okay.
Yeah, there's the, I don't have that data for you today, but the graduate outcome survey tells you the percent who were employed, the percent who would come back to UBC again, the kinds of skills that they learned in the classroom that they're actually using beyond UBC. Really rich data in there. Yeah. And it also, they do it, I think they do a 2-year out and a 5-year out. So you can see the different outcomes. My favorite one is that in the 2-year out, you get the art students and the science students, or the art students and the commerce students, and there's this sort of gap in terms of salary, in terms of saying that, hey, this work is really related to what I studied. By 5 years out, you really couldn't tell. If I put the statistics in front of you, you wouldn't be able to say, well, now that's a computer science student. In fact, I did that last week. Nobody guessed. So that's our real positive message for art students sometimes, is they feel that their outcomes aren't as positive. And they are. It just takes a bit longer. This is one of the things that gets in their way of taking up all those other opportunities, is they are working. About 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 are working between 10 and 20 hours a week, domestic students, and same with the international students. This next few slides I'm going to show you look specifically at mental health and the way that that may be interfering with UBC student learning. So the data that you're looking at now, and remember, this is still new to UBC survey, so we're asking students, they're still, really, they haven't even been here yet, they're just remembering their high school experience. We asked them in the last 12 months, have any of the following affected your academic performance? Anxiety, depression, internet use, computer games, learning disability, relationship difficulties, sleep difficulties, stress, and work. And the definition of sort of interfering or affecting are things like receiving a lower grade on an exam or an important project, lower grade in an entire course, getting an incomplete or dropping a course, or a significant disruption in their studies. So you can see for anxiety and depression, if you look at domestic students and international students, you can see in the case of anxiety has gone up and yet depression has gone down, but together they've stayed about the same. And the same would be true for international. Interesting with the computer use games, hey? That's just going in one direction. For both domestic and international students. And that it's higher than any other single indicator. Although in some of these presentations we'll add anxiety and depression together because they're so highly related.
Okay. How did you define stress?
We let the student define that themselves. So these were just the criteria that or the questions that we gave them. Those were the things that we listed. So it was their own definition.
So what you're saying is that there's an opportunity to make adjustments in this for future surveys? I'd love to talk to you after about that.
Yeah.
Because of some work that we're doing related in your office.
Yeah, there's a big push at UBC right now to look at the mental health of our students. When we do, I'll show you in a moment a slide, the National College of Health Association comparing the mental health of our students to our peer institutions. And time and time again, there's something in UBC's results that students are struggling more with anxiety and depression and loneliness and sadness and so on. So I can tell you about a few of those things.
Yeah, are these is that for first year students?
Yes, this is for incoming students, and then there's more data coming that is for students who are already here.
That would be also interesting.
Yeah.
Do you have data on that of graduate students?
Not with me today. That's graduate student specific. No, but there probably is some I could get you. So this is the 2009 National College Health Association survey. UBC Vancouver students report more negative academic impact from mental health concerns and a greater incidence of mental health symptoms, and they're listed there, than the NCHA reference group of U.S. institutions.
That does only mean what it says. They report more.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they are.
That's right.
They have.
Yes, there could be other influences here. Maybe it's more openness to sharing that kind of information. Certainly if you talk to people in our counseling department and student health, they will verify that the incidence of people seeking out help and the severity of conditions that they're seeing has steadily worsened through the years. So they are seeing the impact.
Because it is more acceptable to seek such help, right?
Yep, that could be part of it as well. And then we asked proportion of students who are concerned. So now, sorry, I'm flipping you back to the new incoming students. We did ask them, did you experience any of these things in the last year? And are you concerned that these issues will persist? And you can see that most are somewhat concerned that those conditions will persist. How many of you have heard of UBC's new Early Alert program? Great. So this is just one of the initiatives that's in response to some of the data around student mental health. It gives the ability for individual faculty members who are noticing students who are struggling in the earlier stages to enter information about the student and to submit a concern. And then there is a team called the Early Alert team who helps with the academic advising office to reach out to students earlier who might be showing signs of difficulty. The training that we do for faculty takes about an hour, and over the next year, hopefully myself or someone like me will be coming into each of your academic departments to give you a full training on it. But what we do know is that the earlier we can reach out to students when they are exhibiting signs of difficulty and mental health difficulties in particular, the faster they can get back on track and the less time it takes to get them back on track. Okay, so I just want to talk last part about Nessie. Hands up, how many are familiar with Nessie? All right, so it's the National Survey of Student Engagement. It is a survey that UBC takes part in. I think there are about 750 different institutions in Canada and the US that participate in this. And it's really measuring what it says, student engagement, so the engagement in their learning. There are benchmarks that are based on 42 key questions, and they capture the vital aspects of the student experience. The student behaviors and institutional features are some of the more powerful contributors to learning and personal development. So Nessie is one of the more sort of well-known, robust, frequently used surveys of higher education. It's based on sound research around student learning. And there are certain factors that research says will boost students' engagement in their learning. So I just want to share with you a couple of, actually some good news coming out of Nessie. That's all a result of your work, I'm sure. Just there to show you the 5 benchmarks. Those are the 5 benchmarks that Nessie is measuring, and through 42 different questions. And the one I just want to show you briefly is around student-faculty interaction. So we know that when students get an opportunity to interact with their faculty member, whether it's to come to your office hours and talk about a paper, or work with you on a research project, or meet you at a departmental event and talk to you about your career, get some career advice, or talking about your academic aspirations, we know, and the research will tell us, that that does boost students' engagement in their learning. They're more likely to engage in the material that you're teaching them. So here are some of the questions that are on the Nessie survey. We asked, or not we, the survey asks, did they do these following activities? So I'll just let you read those. Can everyone read them? Are they too small for anyone? No. Before I show the next slide, I will tell you something that Walter Studeman always tells from PAIR when he presents this data, is that Nessie over time has shown tremendous stability in its data. The results tend to be very stable over time. And universities will say that it is very difficult in Nessie, because of the number of questions for a benchmark, as well as a rather crude scale, just 1 to 7. it's rare to see big changes in any 2 or 3 year differences. But in the last 2011 Nessie data, we did see a significant increase in this. So as when Walter talks about this, what he says is he's all the more convinced that this is a meaningful change, that something is different happening at UBC with regards to that. So the quality of relationships with faculty is substantially improved, marking continuous improvement over 2 Nessie surveys. At the senior level, and that means senior students, we are now equal to Canadian and US peer institutions, which wasn't the case for many years. So that's the last sort of bit of data. We still have another 5 minutes if people want to ask questions. I think we've kind of been talking about this as we went along and experienced some of these trends and what are the implications for teaching. Yeah.
One thing I've always been curious about is the commuter students.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them certainly could be commuting back to their basement suites in Dunbar, and others are commuting back to their parents' homes an hour away. Do we have any way of differentiating among those students and figuring out who tends to be more engaged, who tends to have better mental health, who tends to do better?
I haven't seen it. Usually around commuting you see things like time, and I think UBC has one of the longest commute times, so 80% of our students are commuting, I know that. But unfortunately, no, I haven't seen it. It'd be interesting.
The experience of these students, I would argue, would be dramatically different. If you've got, 3 or 4 18, 19, or 20-year-olds sharing a tiny suite and learning how to be independent young adults together and doing all the things that we used to do, versus students who are going back to their parents' homes and still part of that family dynamic. I see those as 2 very different worlds that we've done a poor job, not because we don't mean to, but just because we don't yet have the tools to actually distinguish between those.
I think one thing that would influence that is the high number of domestic students who report being of Chinese, Korean, or I would say there's a cultural issue there that probably hasn't been unpacked, that they're probably more likely to be living at home. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you have any information or data speaking to mental health differences across faculty, students?
There is. There are faculty, so the NCHA data, all the deans have been given the data for their particular faculty. It may even be on the PAIR website now. Does everyone know the PAIR website? Am I talking? Do you want me to just very quickly show you where you can get this data? See if I have a good, I don't think I have my internet on. So PAIR is short for Planning and Institutional Research. And sometimes with mental health data, it's not put on their website, but if you went to your dean's office or your department head, you could probably get the results for your individual. Oops. So it's the surveys. No, it doesn't look like the NCHA data is there, sorry. But Nessie is there and new to UBC. And this is the graduate outcome survey that you were asking about. Do we survey? So this is a BGS, Baccalaureate Graduate Outcome. So it's the outcomes of our undergraduate students. Yeah.
Do you have any statistics about other disabilities or students rather than just mental health?
Yes, like learning disabilities and that kind of thing.
Disabilities, any kind
Not with me today. I think there's a statistic in here that says how many of our students have some kind of diagnosed disability. Let me just see. 1,778 students with disabilities are registered with Access and Diversity's Disability Services. So if we're a 45,000 student campus, that's quite small.
Many other students who have disability are not registered.
It's possible they just haven't registered yet. Yeah.
You have said the average age of an undergraduate student was 20,
Yes.
and the average age of a graduate student was 28.
Yes.
So that means there's a huge gap after graduating and beginning the graduate study. So students leave the university and and 3 or 4 years later they come back and start the graduate program?
Or it could be as well, many of our graduate students are coming from other institutions. So it could be that another institution might have had a higher average age, or maybe it's difficult to say. Yeah, I think the time to complete, and there are some time to complete stats on here. They've changed their website. But I think the average right now is about 6 years, isn't it? Between 5 and 6 years to complete an undergraduate degree.
No, that's average income, right?
No, it was
Average
20
age.
was the not the average incoming, it was the average age of the undergraduate student, right?
Yeah.
Oh, average, oh my gosh, I don't know. I thought that was average, that's average age of the undergraduate student, not just
So that
incoming.
even if they spend 6 years at UBC, they are graduating with 23.
Right, so you're wondering what's happening for those 5 years.
It isn't
Yeah.
common in the American model. It's much more common for students to go direct. In Canadian, we tend to want to play and earn money and have fun. But it's just, I think I know what you're getting at. I obviously don't have any data, but it isn't as common. I know within my social group that would be the norm.
But 72% are coming directly from high school at UBC. Yeah.
I don't know how difficult it would be to get this data, but it'd be interesting to form a connection between level of involvement, number of students getting A's, and mental health problems, right? Having that connection would be really interesting.
Yeah, to see if there is some correlation there, absolutely. Yeah, I don't know of any, but yeah. Yeah.
When you were talking about those mental health issues, you were a bit fast for me, and I don't know, whom do you compare the Vancouver UBC students to? Because you said we have more incidents or more students reporting having mental health issues.
Yes.
So more in comparison to whom?
They're called US peer institutions. I don't know the names of the institutions, but they're large research intensive universities with a high commuter. We try and compare ourselves to very similar type. So same class sizes, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I can't tell you sort of who our peers are. Yeah.
I think that's all the time we have for today. So thank you, Carol, very much.